Welcome everyone. I hope you're all doing great and doing well. Without further ado, let's dive into our story. Some scandals shake a country and then fade. Others never let go. The world already knows the name Jeffrey Epstein. A hidden network, powerful friends, silence bought with fear. But few outside Morocco have heard what happened here in the same decade, in the same shadows. A case some who lived through it still call more disturbing than anything America ever uncovered. This isn't a story about a stranger in a back alley. This is a story about a man the state itself trusted. A man with a badge. A man whose job was to protect the people of Casablanca, and who used that same badge to hunt them. Respected officer. Secret predator. Two faces that were never supposed to exist in the same man. To understand this case, you have to understand the era it was born in. Morocco, early 1990s. The tail end of what historians would later call the years of lead. Decades where the state watched everyone, and almost no one dared watch the state back. It was the perfect climate for a man like this to hide in plain sight. Inspector Nabil Wazani had just finished a long shift. Nothing about that night felt unusual, until he saw her. A woman standing alone in the corridor, refusing to leave, asking, no, begging for him by name. Her name was Amina Ziani, and what she was about to tell him would end careers, expose a monster, and pull back the curtain on one of the darkest secrets in Moroccan history. She said she'd been taken off the street at knife point, held, assaulted, filmed without her knowledge. She said a man had already warned her, come back to him, or the tape goes public. Wazani had heard 1,000 statements in his career. This one, he later said, felt different from the very first sentence. He had no idea he was about to open the file that would consume the rest of his life. Amina's story poured out in pieces. A man in a dark Mercedes, parked behind her car on a busy street during the holy nights of Ramadan. A knife suddenly at her throat. A stranger who called himself Hamid, a Moroccan living abroad, he claimed, working in law enforcement in Italy. He took her ID card from her bag. He forced her and her friend Fatiha into his car, and somewhere in the city, he drove them to an apartment building. So far, a frightening story, a believable one. But Inspector Wazani had spent 2 decades reading people for a living, and the longer Amina talked, the more small cracks began to show. First crack, she said the man held a knife to her neck with one hand, and used that same hand to open her bag and pull out her ID. A man would need 3 hands to do all of that at once. Hamid, it seemed, only had 2. Second crack, Fatiha, the friend in the car. Nobody tied her hands. Nobody covered her mouth. She sat alone in that car for 3 full minutes before the man ever got out, and never once opened the door and ran. Third crack, and the biggest one, the building itself. Amina described it in detail. Not abandoned, not hidden. A building full of families, children, neighbors coming and going, and directly below it, a crowded cafe spilling out onto the sidewalk. If this had truly been a kidnapping under threat of a blade, someone, anyone, should have screamed. No one did. Wazani began to see a different shape underneath her story. Not an abduction. Something closer to an arrangement gone wrong. A woman who had gone somewhere willingly, and only came forward once she learned she'd been filmed without her knowledge and threatened with exposure. He didn't say this to her face. Not yet. What mattered now was the address, the one detail in her story that could be checked, confirmed, and followed. He asked her one final question. Could she lead his men back to that building? She said yes, without hesitation. Wazani closed the file, picked up his phone, and gave the order to assemble a small team from the Vice Squad. He had no idea, in that moment, whose door they were about to knock on. The address checked out exactly as Amina described it. The building, the cafe below, the families coming and going, and parked just outside it. A dark Mercedes-Benz, matching, plate for plate, the one she described from that night. A registration check came back within the hour, and that's when the case stopped feeling routine. The car wasn't registered to a stranger. It was registered to a man wearing the same uniform Wazani wore. A senior officer, a name known and respected inside the walls of the security services themselves. Wazani laid out a set of photographs in front of Amina. Faces of several officers from the district, mixed in deliberately, no names attached. She didn't hesitate. She didn't scan the row twice. Her finger landed on one photograph immediately. That's him, she said. That's the man who took me, who filmed me, who's threatening me. The photograph showed a senior commissioner in the intelligence services, a man known his own district by a respectful nickname, earned from his pilgrimage to Mecca years earlier. They called him El Hajj. Wazani knew exactly who that man was. Everyone in the district did. This wasn't a stranger who'd slipped through the cracks. This was a colleague, a superior, a man with real power inside the very institution meant to stop men like him. And Wazani understood, sitting there alone, that filing this report honestly could cost him everything. He filed it anyway, by the book. Statement, medical certificate, photo identification, sealed, and delivered by hand to his direct superior, a man named Hassan Bargain. It was the last time Wazani would have any real control over what happened next. Bargain didn't send investigators. He didn't seal the case for review. He picked up the phone and called El Hajj directly. Someone's filed a complaint against you, he said. Go deal with it. 2 days later, Amina was called back to the station. Not for a formal statement this time, just a quiet conversation, off the record, with Bargain himself. He told her the man had made a terrible mistake. A moment of weakness, nothing more. A husband, a father, a man with a career and a family who didn't deserve to lose everything over one lapse in judgment. He told her the tape no longer existed, that he had destroyed it personally, and he handed her a phone number, his own home line, he said, in case anything like it ever surfaced again. All he asked in return was one signature, a withdrawal of her complaint. At first, she refused, but the pressure didn't stop. A second officer, Said Amrani, was brought in to speak with her, gentler this time, more patient. Days later, worn down and afraid of what fighting a man like this might cost her, Amina signed. What none of them fully reckoned with was this. A withdrawal only settles a civil claim. It doesn't erase a crime. Somewhere in the prosecutor's office, a second copy of Amina's original complaint still existed, quietly waiting, technically still alive, even as everyone around the case moved on as if it were finished. As for Inspector Wazani, the message was delivered without a single word needing to be said. He was pulled from his post in Hay Mohammadi, demoted, and not long after, reassigned entirely, transferred far south, to a post where no one would ever ask him what he knew or why. He had no way of knowing it then, but this wasn't the end of his story with El Hajj. It was only an intermission. 3 years would pass in that quiet exile, and in those 3 years, 2 entirely separate threads, with no connection to Amina Ziani at all, would begin tightening around the same man from 2 directions he never saw coming. 1,500 kilometers away, in an apartment in Milan, a young man named Youssef was spending an ordinary night with friends. Someone had brought a videotape. Nothing unusual. The kind of thing young men pass around late at night, half joking, half curious. Then the picture changed everything. The voices on the tape were Moroccan. That alone was strange enough. But then Youssef recognized a face. Not a stranger's. His own sister's. Nadia, 18 years old, barely older than a child in his eyes. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, he was on the first flight home to Casablanca. His mother told him Nadia no longer lived at home. She was working now. She said, sharing an apartment with a friend. Youssef didn't believe it for a second. He pressed her, gently but relentlessly, until the real story came out. A year earlier, Nadia had been waiting for a bus in her neighborhood when a man introduced himself. Charming, confident, a man everyone seemed to defer to. Within days, she had vanished from her family's life completely. Weeks later, Nadia was arrested, accused, absurdly, of soliciting on a public street. She spent 15 days in a cell before she was released. She told her mother, in confidence, that the same man who had approached her at the bus stop was the one who had arranged the false charge in the first place. A warning, dressed up as a coincidence. Terrified of prison, terrified of the shame a false charge could bring on her family, Nadia had stopped resisting. She was living now, her mother admitted, in an apartment on a quiet side street in Hay Mohammadi. Youssef recognized the address the moment he heard it. It was the same building, the same man his mother had just described. Charming, respected, untouchable, was El Hajj. Youssef didn't go to the police, not after what he'd learned about who owned that apartment. Instead, he borrowed a car, parked across the street, and waited. On the 3rd evening, he saw her, Nadia, thinner than he remembered, moving quickly, glancing over her shoulder like someone who had learned not to trust an open street. He called out to her, her own brother's voice, and she ran, not toward him, away from him, back through the door she'd just come out of, as if being seen with family was the most dangerous thing that could happen to her. He didn't even reach the door. Within seconds, 2 men had him by the arms, forcing him into a car that had appeared out of nowhere. They drove him to the edge of the city, roughed him up, and left him on an empty street with a clear message. Stop looking for her. Youssef didn't listen. For 15 more days, he came back, watching from a distance, learning the rhythm of the building. When she left, when she was alone, when the street was empty enough to risk it. On the 15th day, his patience finally paid off. He got her out, quietly, carefully, without a single person from that building noticing. He brought her to relatives, somewhere El Hajj's reach couldn't easily follow. And there, finally safe, Nadia told her brother everything. The threats, the false arrest, the fear that had kept her trapped in that apartment for over a year. She told him she'd stayed because she believed the alternative was worse. Prison, or public disgrace, or both. Youssef knew that a spoken story, without proof, could be denied by powerful people forever. So he did something methodical. He sat his sister down, turned on a borrowed camera, and asked her to tell her story again, this time for the record. Nadia spoke calmly, in full detail. The bus stop, the false arrest, the years spent trapped by fear of a system she no longer trusted to protect her. It was the only weapon Youssef had, and he intended to use it. Because of his dual nationality, Youssef had one door most Moroccans in his position didn't, the Italian consulate in Rabat. He walked in, asked for a diplomatic officer, and handed over a copy of the tape, along with everything his sister had told him. The diplomat watched the tape, listened to the story, and made a call of his own to a contact he trusted inside the Moroccan government. Within days, the matter reached the desk of Morocco's prime minister himself, and from there, it went further still, all the way to the royal palace. Morocco's monarch was informed of the allegations directly, and he gave a single, clear order: open an investigation. No exceptions, no protection for anyone. For the first time in over a year, the machinery protecting El Hajj had cracked. But even a royal order takes time to move through the right hands. And while that order made its way down through the ranks, a second, entirely unconnected storm was already gathering, closer to home and far more sudden. Salma Fassi and Yasmin Toumi were medical students, sharp, ambitious, and, like many young women in Casablanca's more elite social circles, familiar with a man everyone simply called El Hajj. He was known, quietly, as someone who could open doors, introduce the right people, arrange the right evenings for the right price. For a long time, the arrangement seemed simple enough to them. Nothing more than an unspoken transaction between adults. Until one afternoon in February, by pure chance, they noticed something behind that mirror that changed everything. A camera, hidden in plain sight, aimed directly at the bed. And when they searched further, they found something worse still. A videotape of another young woman entirely, recorded in that same room, with El Hajj and men neither of them recognized. They realized in that moment exactly what they had become. Not guests, not clients, bait for a much larger and darker operation than either of them had ever imagined. When they confronted him, he didn't deny it. He simply made the same threat he'd made to others before them: continue on his terms or watch their lives and their families' names be destroyed by what he had recorded. But unlike so many before them, Salma and Yasmin had one advantage: powerful acquaintances of their own. One of their regular clients had a personal connection inside the royal cabinet. When they told him everything, he didn't hesitate to make a call. This time, there was no slow trickle through friendly superiors. This time, the order came down fast, and it deliberately bypassed the regular police entirely. The Royal Gendarmerie was given the file, and within hours, a convoy was already moving toward a quiet apartment building in Hay Mohammadi. The convoy arrived without warning. Gendarmerie officers, a senior general leading them, and, almost unbelievably, El Hajj himself, escorted alongside the very men sent to search his home. What they found inside would haunt every officer present for the rest of their careers. Hidden cameras, Not just in one room, in every room. Angled mirrors positioned to widen every shot. Microphones tucked beneath mattresses to capture every word. In the bedroom, they found the true scale of it. 118 tapes. More than 500 separate women, recorded across years, without a single one of them ever knowing a camera was running. And it wasn't careless. Beside each tape, El-Hajj had kept a written record. Full name, national ID number, home address, even internal police reference numbers for women who had once been questioned by his own department. This wasn't compulsion without control. This was a filing system. Only one item in that apartment was never opened, a locked travel trunk in the corner of the room. El-Hajj claimed he didn't have the key. No one forced it. No one is entirely sure why. By the letter of the law, this was a textbook case of suspect caught red-handed. And yet, when the search ended, no one placed El-Hajj under arrest. No guard was posted at the sealed door. He simply returned to his office and finished his shift as if it were any other day. That same night, El-Hajj returned to his own sealed apartment, this time with a handful of officers under his command, and ordered the official seals broken. He took the locked trunk and vanished into the dark toward the Capitol. To this day, no one outside that car has ever confirmed what was inside it or where it went. The officers who helped him that night would later serve real prison sentences for breaking those seals. El-Hajj himself would walk free for 4 more days before anyone dared to arrest him. 4 days after the raid, El-Hajj was finally arrested, and with him, 15 others were swept into the case, some genuinely guilty, some, like Inspector Wazani, guilty of nothing more than having once tried to do his job honestly. The trial that followed would come to be known across Morocco simply as the trial of the century. Cameras were secretly placed inside the courtroom to document it. Opposition newspapers and political parties seized on the case as proof of everything they'd long suspected about unchecked power inside the security services. During questioning, El-Hajj described his method with chilling calm. Schools, university gates, public bathhouses, ordinary streets. He would approach women directly, and if charm failed, threats followed. Once inside his apartment, resistance only made things worse for them. His own defense tried a different argument entirely, that no ordinary man could have done what he'd done to over 500 women and remained sane. They requested a psychiatric evaluation. The judge refused. The evidence was clear, cataloged, and undeniable. This wasn't a man who had lost control. This was a man who had built a system. Throughout the trial, one detail unsettled even seasoned court officers. El-Hajj would occasionally lean toward his own lawyers and mutter about tape 32, as though it held something even he didn't want spoken aloud in that room. That tape was never shown. Its contents, to this day, remain unknown. And in a quiet room away from the cameras, Inspector Wazani gave his own testimony, insisting he had filed the original report exactly as procedure required and handed it, sealed, to his superior. His superior denied ever receiving it. So did the prosecutor's office. After a full month of testimony, evidence, and a nation watching from behind every newspaper and radio dial in the country, the court was finally ready to deliver its verdict. The verdict, when it finally came, left no room for ambiguity. El-Hajj, sentenced to death. Every tape, order destroyed. Every recorded piece of evidence confiscated for good, so that not one more woman would ever have to fear its release. The men around him did not escape justice either. Bargain, the superior who had buried the original report and warned El-Hajj directly, received a life sentence for obstruction and complicity. Amrani received 20 years and would die in prison just 1 year later, before a royal pardon in 1997 finally acknowledged what many had long believed, that he had acted in good faith, never fully understanding the horror he'd helped protect. And then there was Inspector Wazani, the man who had done everything by the book, the man whose honest report had simply vanished into someone else's silence. He was convicted anyway, and served 7 years in prison for a crime that consisted, in truth, of trusting the wrong superior at the wrong moment in history. When he finally walked free, his health was broken, his finances gone, his name still shadowed by a conviction he always maintained was unjust. To this day, he is still waiting for the system he once served to admit that it failed him. Later that year, in a quiet forest outside the capital, the sentence against El-Hajj was carried out. The man who had once made hundreds of women feel powerless faced, in his final moment, the one thing he had never once shown any of them. Due process carried out to its final and irreversible end. The building in Hay Mohammadi still stands today. Families still live there. The cafe below still serves coffee to men who have likely never heard this story at all. But for the hundreds of women whose names once filled a hidden filing system, and for the officer who tried and failed to stop it through the front door, the case never really closed. This case forced Morocco to look, briefly and painfully, at what unchecked power can hide behind a badge and a respected name. It's a story with no clean ending. Only the ones who survived it, and the truth they finally forced into the light. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next case.